a writer? What should a child do if they want to become a writer? Well, the first thing that I would suggest is to read as much as you possibly can. That is the first thing, because when you're reading, of course, you are actually going to many different places and it's stretching your imagination so that you can see those places and imagine that all this action is happening in those places. And the other thing that it's doing is teaching you about language and about story. So the more language you read, the more you absorb. The different patterns become quite natural to you in your brain so that you can try different things when you're writing. And that's the thing that I think helped me the most. I would read as much as I could. And even if it was challenging, I would kind of keep trying with my reading, because what it did was really expand my world. I'll give you an example. There's an author called Mark Twain who has been very popular in previous generations, right up to my generation. And he wrote Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. And the language that he writes in is completely foreign to me. It's almost like not English. It's a southern USA. It's the south of the USA, the Mississippi region. And for me, oh, I can see somebody's holding up some Mark Twain thing there. Anya, you have something there from Mark Twain, do you?
Yes.
What is it? Can I see again?
Tom Sawyer.
Oh, I see. There we are, Tom Sawyer. I loved that book when I was a kid. And you know, that is written in a kind of speech pattern that was completely foreign to me. It was like reading a language that was kind of English, but kind of not English. And at first it took a little while to get used to, but then after a while I started to understand it, and I started to feel that it was natural inside my head, and it actually helped me to go into that world of Tom Sawyer and to even have a little bit of a crush on his girlfriend, Becky. I don't know if you've read that, Anya. Have you read that book? No, well, in there, Tom Sawyer, he kind of likes this girl, Becky Thatcher. And I kind of got a little bit of a crush on Becky too, because Tom liked her too. But you see, that's what happens. You go into a completely different place. And that's what I like to do when I write. Daydreamer Dev. Has anybody read this first book that I wrote about Daydreamer Dev? Can you give me thumbs up if you have read this book? Thumbs down. Thumbs down. Oh, I see. Okay, so in this book, you see, he goes through his daydreams to 3 different places, and he has an adventure in each one. So when Daydreamer Dev goes to somewhere, that's kind of like me going to write a story. When I go to write a story, I must let my imagination go into the story so completely that I can see the characters, and I can see the characters doing things, and I can hear the characters saying things. And then I think, oh, when they hear that, what would they think, and what would they do, and what would they say? And then that's how I tell my story, because I'm seeing it in a real way. So really, me writing a story is very much like Daydreamer Dev going to climb Mount Everest. It is me going away from my immediate present location to have an adventure in my imagination. And in this book, he goes to climb Mount Everest, and he goes to trace the Amazon River, and he goes to cross the Sahara Desert. Do you know I should not have said Sahara Desert? Do you know why I should not have said Sahara Desert? Does anybody know? Because Sahara means desert. Desert, desert.
It's very hot.
Desert, desert. You see, if I say Sahara Desert, I'm really saying desert, desert. I should just say the Sahara, because that's what it's called. It's called the Sahara. And if you don't know what Sahara means, we say Sahara Desert, but it's actually the Sahara. And he crosses the Sahara with his best friend, OP, who is a little bit of a know-it-all. His real name is Om Prakash, but they call him OP for short. And sometimes OP goes on an adventure with Dev, and he goes on another adventure with Dev in the new book. So each of the Dev books has 3 stories. In that one, in this one, it is Mount Everest, the Amazon, and the Sahara. And in this one, can you tell me, where does he go? Yes?
Volcano, South Pole, and the moon. The moon and the South Pole.
Very good, very good. That's right. He goes to those places. And do you know who told me that he should go to those places? No, you don't know who told me. Lots of kids, just like you, told me that he should go to those places. Because last time I was in India and the time before, just before the pandemic, I asked big audiences of kids, where would you like Daydreamer Dev to go in the next stories? Where do you think his daydreams should take him? And they said, volcano, sir, volcano, volcano, volcano. I hadn't thought about that. I didn't know that a volcano would be a really cool place for him to have a daydream. But I thought, maybe he could. And I was thinking that Daydreamer Dev could go to the North Pole. That's what I was thinking. But lots of kids said to me, South Pole. How about the South Pole? And so I thought, well, that's closer to Australia. Maybe I'll be able to have an Australian connection there, which is, in fact, if you read that story, I have made an Australian connection there because Dave meets some Australians, including an Australian school teacher. So that was why I thought it would be nice to ask children where he could go next. And the most popular place was the moon. And I had not thought of Dev going to the moon. I thought that Daydreamer Dev was a character who had daydreams around this particular world and all the marvelous places that most of us have not been on this planet. But kids thought, what if he goes away from this planet? What if he goes, what if he goes to the moon? What if he goes into space? And I thought, well, that would be exciting. And then I thought, what if he joins an expedition of people who are going to see what the moon can provide to us here on Earth? And that's what they're doing right now. That's why there's so much interest in the moon right now, because there are minerals on the moon. And some of those minerals would be very valuable here on Earth. And so people are actually looking for things that they can bring from the moon to Earth in the future. And one of those things would help our environment, because one of the things we need a lot of on Earth here right now is batteries, because we want to be able to store energy. We want to be able to store energy that is created from sustainable sources like the sun and the wind. And so we need batteries, and we need things that can create these batteries. And on the moon, there are some minerals that we can use to make batteries. And those things are very expensive here on Earth. And so the expense of bringing something from the moon may not be impossible. It may actually be a good idea for the future of this planet, because it would be good in terms of storing natural energy here on Earth. And so through these stories, Dave goes and finds out about all these things. when he is on this expedition to go to the moon, there is an international crew on board. But what Dev and the crew do not know is that Dev's friend, OP, has stowed himself away secretly on the spaceship. And so at some point in the journey, OP emerges into the spaceship and he's floating around, you know. He's floating around in the spaceship and they get a terrible shock. They get a big surprise to find that he's there. But then when they're on the moon, he can join Dev for the adventure. So what I'm doing is allowing my character, Dev, to daydream an adventure. And then through his adventure to take you and 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 you on an adventure to learn something about these places as well. I learn so that I can write the story. Then I write the story and you learn something, but most of all, I want those adventures to be fun things for you. And that's what people were telling me about this book. They were saying, we've had so much fun reading this book. Are you going to write another one? And I said, do you want me to? And they said, yes. And I said, where could he go? And that's when they came up with all the ideas that came into this book here. And maybe some of you will have ideas after you read this about where Daydreamer Dev might go next. And that's something that I would love to hear about because I'm now searching for ideas about that. I wonder, I'm sure some of you will have ideas. Maybe some of you will tell me some ideas today. I can see Pooja nodding her head. Yeah, you're nodding. Do you have an idea right now, Pooja? Do you have an idea? Does anybody have a suggestion for me now about where he?
Sir, this is Akshita.
Akshita, hello.
I've got an idea that he might meet a giant who lives on top of the clouds.
On top of the clouds? And what?
Beanstalk's giant.
What did you say, Naisha?
Like Jack and the Beanstalk's giant.
Oh, I see, like Jack and the Beanstalk's giant, I see. Yes, so we could create a whole world up there, couldn't we? Yes, a cloud. One of the wonderful things about clouds is that they look like something, but they're kind of like an illusion because they're little particles of water. And when you go in an aeroplane, we fly through them. So even though they look like something, and sometimes they look really solid, we can go straight through them like that. And so somehow Dev's got to try to imagine how he might do that. And that would be fun. That would be fun. That's a lovely suggestion. I see Elena has her hand there. Elena.
He could go to Mars.
To Mars, another space adventure. And of course, there are many people on Earth now thinking about going to Mars, aren't there? And planning to go to Mars if possible. Vanya, I see you there. You have something to say.
Madagascar.
Say that again.
Madagascar.
Madagascar. Oh, I think you're thinking about all the wonderful wildlife that he could see on Madagascar. I love Madagascar because it has so many creatures that are very different to the Australian creatures. So that would be very interesting. What are these little hands on the screens? Is that
Yeah, they want to ask. They probably had raised their hands at one time, but they're also physically raising. So Ganeev is ready with something and Saisha is ready with something also.
Okay. Who's next then?
Ganeev, go on, ask your question. Oh, sorry, give your suggestion.
Sir, Daydreamer Dev could go to Antarctica.
Antarctica is there. It's there in this book.
Well, Ganeev, actually, if you're interested in Antarctica, you're going to enjoy the first story. I think it's the first story in this book. The second story in this book. Second story is where he goes, you see, I don't even know. He goes to the South Pole. So the South Pole is just one of the many places at Antarctica. And you will learn that when he goes to the South Pole, it's not very much to look at, It's just like a pole, just like a little pole in the ground with like a disco ball on the top. And he's not very impressed with that. But Antarctica is a fantastic place, and it's a very large place. And we actually learn a lot about Antarctica because two of the nations that have research places in Antarctica are Australia, that's been there for a long time, and India. And Dev meets some of the people who work in those stations. Saisha.
He could go above the rainbow.
I love rainbows, Saisha. In fact, there's a rainbow here today, Saisha. I'm fascinated by rainbows. There's a rainbow here today. It's the middle of winter in Australia. It's a horrible day. It's a cold day, but the sun has just come out and it's been raining. So we have rainbows here today. That's a nice suggestion. Swati, did you want to?
Yes, I wanted to ask why you never went to the Barrier Reef, the Great Barrier Reef.
The Great Barrier Reef. That's a great suggestion. I must say that had not occurred to me, but I love it. I love it.
Close the hole.
I'll have to dedicate that. I'll dedicate that one to you.
Okay,
Maybe I'll use your name in that story. Yes, now I already have some questions here.
Yes.
I actually have a few questions that people sent in before. Maitali, is that how I say the name? Maitali?
Maitali, yeah.
Where's Maitali? I'm just looking for, is Maitali there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I cannot see you.
Can you see me now?
That's Pooja Jagdale's screen.
Pooja. No, I don't have you on my screen. Oh, there's Pooja. I see Pooja, yeah. Okay, where is Maitali? Is Maitali there, Swati?
There, she's not there. She's not there.
I'm on my mama's phone.
Oh, that's why.
She's a
Okay.
Pooja. Yeah, she's a Pooja.
Okay. All right. Sorry. See, this
Okay.
is what happens, right? We've got mama's phone and child. Oh God, so confusing.
Okay.
All right.
Now,
go on.
Vanya sent some questions to me. She asked me, I can see you, Vanya, and that's your mum, is it, Vanya?
Yes.
I
Remember
I
that
see that you have asked me, do you receive letters? Do I receive letters from children who have read my books? Oh, there's a photo of me.
yeah,
I see.
we met you.
So
Yes.
we have met. We
Yes.
have met before.
Yeah, we met at Tulika at Clumsy book launch.
Oh, lovely. Oh, no. Yeah, with the clumsy. Oh,
Yes.
Vanya, you have grown so much. You have grown so much. Are you still there? Are you still there? Are you still in? Are you still?
Yes.
Okay, it's nice to see you again. I see that you have asked me about letters from children. And I do not receive very many letters from children, but I do receive a lot of emails. But letters are always very special when I do receive one. And do you like to write letters on paper? Do you, Vanya? Yeah. Okay. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to put my. Can you read that?
Yeah. P.O. Box 60.
Yeah.
6033.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is my postal address. So if you want to, I will just hold it there for a little while. Yeah, I don't receive many letters from children, but I do receive quite a lot of emails.
Yes.
And it's always wonderful to hear from children, from readers, anybody who loves reading, and also, of course, from people who are interested in writing. I always like to hear from those people as well. Are there people here who love to write? Do you like to write stories? Naisha, she's very keen. Her arm has gone right through the top of my computer screen. Naisha, your arm is touching my roof, I think. You had it so high there. You must love writing a lot, do you?
I love writing a lot.
Excellent. Well, maybe you could send me a story sometime. Yeah? Maybe you could send me a story one day. And
Yeah.
Vanya has another question for me, and that is, do I love cakes and cookies? There are some cakes and cookies I love too much, and so I try not to eat them. That's the answer to your question, because I don't want this to get much bigger. You see? I love to eat things like that, but I have to restrict myself, and I have to make sure that I do exercise, because, you know, if I'm inactive writing books and I eat too many cakes and cookies, then I'm going to get very fat and unhealthy, and I don't want that. Elena, where's Elena? Let me see. Where is Elena?
Yes.
Elena has, there's Elena. She has sent me some questions as well. The book has many Indian names and themes and ways. This is what Elena has asked me. If Ken is Australian, yes, I'm Australian, then how did he manage to write the book? How much research goes into writing on cross-cultural themes? Well, it's a very good question, but the first thing I want to say to that, Elena, is this, that all writers pretend to be someone else. They kind of make characters that are not themselves. So for example, if I'm an author and I write about a girl, well, I'm not a girl, so I have to imagine myself to be a girl, and I have to imagine what it's like to be that girl. And it's the same really with writing about people who have problems that I don't have. For example, if I write about a child who has some kind of disability that I don't have, then I have to put myself in that child's shoes. And it's the same with everything. So when I'm writing about a character who is not of the same nationality as myself, I need to imagine that. But yes, I do need to absorb a lot of information so that I can do that. And I want to tell you how I've been able to do that and to start writing about Indian characters. I wrote that in the introduction. I wrote a little bit in the first part of this book that explains something about my writing, about Indian characters. And this is what I wrote. I had never planned to write stories with Indian characters and settings. And the first one came to me whilst I was writing something else. That first story was about a homesick girl in love with reading and inspired by Ruskin Bond. And I just had to give that story priority. Later published with the title Advaita, the Writer, it paved the way for many more books set in India or featuring Indian characters living in Australia. As I reflect on this now, I see just how inspired I have been and how immediately inspired I was by the spirit of India. My characters are inclined to take on life's challenges with imagination and a sense of humor. They are optimistic, enterprising, feisty, and unbreakable. These are attributes I associate more with the people of India than those of any other country. And perhaps the no limits attitude underpinning the reveries of Dev is my central message to all young readers. In my life now, not in my life, yeah, in my life, but also in the 10 years before the pandemic, I spent more than a year in India, not with one going to and coming back, but with many trips to India. I spent 1 year in India in the 10 years before that. It was in less than that, actually. I spent more than 1 year. But that's how much of my life I've now spent in India. I've spent quite a lot of time there. And I've met so many people and met so many friends there and met so many children there. And I've done so much reading about India. I never thought it was research. I didn't think it was research. This is what you asked me, Elena. Do I need to do a lot of research? Well, I didn't think of it as research. I loved being in India and I loved meeting people. I loved making friends. And all of these books in this shelf behind me here are books that I have bought on the subcontinent. Most of them are Indian authors. Some are from other places on the subcontinent. But these are just the books for adults that I've read. I've read so many other books that are written for teenagers and children that are written by Indian authors. And so all of these things have gone into my head. And I've imagined them to be real. Every one of these books has characters that were real to me when I read the books. You know, when you read a book, they become very real to you. When I read a book, these characters become very real to me. And so I get inside their lives, their family lives. And so when I come to create an Indian character, it's not so difficult for me anymore. I can create Dev, his friend, his teacher at school, his parents, and I can try my hardest to make them real. If I make a mistake with their speech or something like that, then I trust my editors at Puff in India to say, hey, Ken, in India, it would be like this. But, you know, it doesn't happen very often now because I've been to India enough and I've heard enough and I've listened enough to get things right most of the time, I think. So that's a fantastic question, Elena, and thank you for asking it.
Ken, Maithili is actually the child who's on Pooja Jagdale's phone. Pooja is her mother. So Maithili is there. I just, I'm sorry about that. I'm really sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. Now she has asked me, Maithili has asked me that whether an author needs to write a story every day. The answer to that is kind of yes, in my case. Every author is different, but even if I don't actually do some writing, I'm thinking about the story that I am writing. And sometimes when I'm not actually at my desk, the ideas progress in that story. So in a way, I'm working on that story every day. I may not be writing it today and I may not be finishing it today, but somewhere in my mind it's ticking over. And when I go for a walk, when it's not raining, then I can get some ideas for the story or for another story. And so we're always working like that. The next question you asked is, do we have to finish a story in one day? No, definitely not. It would be very, very hard to do that, to start and finish a story in one day, even a first draft. Once I did it, once I've written about 82 books or something, I don't know, 80 something, but one of my picture books, I wrote the first draft in one day from about 11 o'clock in the morning till about 12 o'clock midnight. I wrote the first draft. And then I needed to make it better and better after that. So, but normally, no, you do not finish a story in one day. And do they write stories day and night? Well, it's always there in the head. Like I said, sometimes a story will not let you go. Sometimes it will let you go for a little while, and then suddenly it will grab you again and drag you back to your desk and sit you down so that you need to write. So they're the questions you asked, and thank you for asking me those. And thank you, Pooja, for for explaining that that's actually not you on the screen, that's Maithili.
Yes,
So to
sir.
finish the book, I'm reading it right now.
Who was
Ganeev.
speaking?
That is Ganeev. He came and bought the book from the bookstore yesterday, so he hasn't had time to read it as yet. But
Okay,
but can I add a little note about Ganeev, which I found out is that he's a great cricket fan, and it was a pleasure meeting him. And you know, Venki and he could speak about cricket at length. Isn't that so, Ganeev?
I wish that right now you and I, Ganeev, could go to the nets and, you know, get into a little bit of action. Now, do you prefer to bat or bowl?
It's quiet.
You prefer to bat. All right, I'll bowl then. I'll bowl. How about that, Ganeev? I saw somebody else. Akshita, is that your hand? You have a hand on your screen.
So I raised my hand to tell you that I have an idea that they could also travel through time and see how dinosaurs got extinct and how humans turn into humans after they became monkeys, and then how we became humans.
Oh, time.
You know, Akshita, it's a really interesting idea, and some children have mentioned that idea of him doing a little bit of time traveling before. I haven't ventured there because I've only just ventured off this planet with Dev. So he's taken his first trip away from Earth in this latest book. And I'm not sure, but some kids have mentioned to me that he could also take some trips through time. And so I'll keep in mind your suggestion as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so.
And Akshita also sent a question this morning. I'm butting in and telling you that she says that she has started writing some stories and she wanted advice on how to begin and end stories. Yeah.
Well, oh, they're your stories. How wonderful. Oh, very good. I can give you some advice on beginning and ending. The first thing that my advice about beginning a story is to get straight as soon as you can into the action. Don't leave it too long to get to the main part of the story. So if you can, always get the reader on the first paragraph on the page. Let them kind of know what this story is going to be about, what the problem is, what this character needs to do. So it might be that your character is remembering hearing something that somebody said, like you must do this or something. And then the character is starting to deal with how they're going to deal with that. So we kind of know what the problem is early in the story. Now, one of the ways that I like to hook a reader at the beginning of a story is to have some speech. I think it's a really good way of letting the reader hear somebody speak, because that makes it more real for us. So rather than just having a long introduction before anybody speaks in the story, you'll see that almost always I will have somebody speaking on the first page. If not the first page, the second page for sure. But you check in all of these stories and any books that I've written, and you will see that I'm very keen to get the characters speaking to each other, because it helps move the story along. We can't just have a little conversation that means nothing. We can't just be saying, hello, how are you? Oh, I'm fine, thank you. What have you been up to? Well, this morning I got out of my bed, you know, and then I had my breakfast, and then I brushed my teeth. And now the reader is bored. You see, what we want to happen is we want some little bit of speech that casts us into the action, you know, that is not just a lead in that seems to take forever. We want to get there quickly. So that's my tip for starting a story. When it comes to finishing a story, I think it's important to relax a little bit as the author, because after the main bit of the story has happened, the main exciting bit of the story, you know, it's here, then it can be a little bit of a come down. And if you want to over explain that as well, just like the beginning, it gets boring because the main bit's already happened. So just relax a little bit as an author once you get past that main bit, and think about your main character, the one we care about, the one your reader cares about, and think, how do they feel? What are they doing now? Okay? Because your character is your story. When you create a story, we must follow the journey of your character. So just see what your character is feeling and doing at the end, and then you'll know how to finish your story. Okay?
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Fantastic. Ken, may I add something over here? That in this book and generally, I find a lot of humor in your books, and humor meaning not forced humor. It's kind of, quietly coming in, exactly how children would, sometimes a little cocky, sometimes a little sneaky, but that's so amazing. I mean, children will probably not, they will see it as part of the story, but as an adult, I'm saying this, that, that adds such an interesting, I won't even say interesting, it's part of the weave that you are weaving, it's part of the fabric that you have woven, but it's so beautifully done and it's so contemporary and so amazing. Children, you will not probably notice because it's part of the story, like I'm saying. But thank you so much for that. That's so needed, so much needed. Sometimes books can be so worthy and full of some lesson or something, but this is just bang on. Totally.
Oh, thank you very much. That is so beautiful, Swati. I really appreciate that, especially coming from you, who've dedicated so much of your life to books. That's very meaningful to me. But what I can say about humor, I think that in any story, even the most serious story, humor can engage the reader just that little bit more. Everybody, even in everyday life, people joke about serious things, and it engages us in the moment that little bit more. And one of the things that I think children, this is something for you to remember, is that one of the great skills in life is to be able to choose when to bring yourself into the present moment, to be really fully here and aware. And you should be actually able to bring yourself to that point where you are hyper aware, where you're listening broadly, not just listening to the thing that's in front of you, listening. And you can really become aware of much more of the world than you normally are, simply by practicing, by observing more. You can become much more aware, and you can learn much more about the world that way, and be so much more equipped to thrive, to succeed in the world if you are aware of bigger and broader things. But at the same time, there's another skill. One is to bring yourself into the present moment, and the other thing is to just release yourself from the present moment and the immediate, because that's a great skill as well. And particularly in dark times, in bad times, the skill to take yourself away, lose yourself in a train of thought, lose yourself in a book, is a really wonderful skill. And it can even be a survival skill. And it has, some very brainy people who've written about human history have noticed that psychologically it's very important for us to be able to move away from what we are here in the here and now, because sometimes the here and now can be terrible. So being able to go into a book and to live the journey of a character is a wonderful skill. And if you can daydream like Dev, then that is taking you away from the immediate, the present moment as well. And I have to admit to you, children, that I was a big daydreamer in classrooms when I was at school. Can you believe that, Alina? Can you believe that? I was a big daydreamer. Can you believe that? I think you do believe it, do you? Yes. I was daydreaming. I would be kind of elsewhere, and the teacher would know that I was elsewhere. And so the teacher would say to me, she would be asking the class a question, and she'd say, Ken, will you answer that for me? And I would suddenly be brought back to the present moment. I had been somewhere else. And then with time, I developed the skill of being able to replay what she had just said before I came back to the present moment, so that I could kind of trick her. I could kind of trick the teacher. She thought I wasn't listening, but some part of my brain was listening. So I was climbing Mount Everest or something. And then, Ken, can you answer that question? And quickly I would replay what the teacher told me, and I would give the answer. And I would be very surprised, these teachers, that I could actually give the right answer, because they were sure I wasn't listening. And most of me wasn't listening. But I developed that skill of being able to come back and go away and come back and go away. And eventually I found that that was quite entertaining. And sometimes in Australia, we have to go on long car journeys, very long car journeys that can be very boring. And I remember being very bored when I was a very little kid. And, you know, my big sister said, you don't have to be bored, you know, just use your imagination. And she was right. You know, my big sister was right. I was very annoyed because I could see that she was right. And, you know, I didn't like anything my big sister told me, but she was right. And from then on, I thought, I love journeys. You know, I can float off, I can look at things and imagine things happening. I can be a bird. I can be a bird flying along beside the car. I can be a bird high above the car, looking down on our car, traveling through the countryside. I can grab onto that tree there and be pulled out of the window and see our car going off into the distance. All of these things were kind of practicing using my imagination. And that's what you can do too. But coming back to humor, I really think that it is the author's task to entertain the reader. And we need to use as many things as we possibly can to do that, so that even in an action story, even in a serious story, we can use a little bit of humor, because that's what happens in life. Even in wartime, people joke around. Even in pandemics, people joke around. So let's do it in stories as well.
Okay, so children, any more questions?
No.
I have been asking questions on your behalf because I have so many questions of you. I rarely get a chance.
This is Akshita. I'm
Yes.
a bit of a daydreamer too. Sometimes I do it.
Well, do you know, Akshita, I'm actually happy to hear that. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. All of us do it. All of us do it. Some of us, you and I, probably do it more than others. You know, we may do it more than others, but there's nothing wrong with that, because, you know, there's a kind of intelligence in imagination. I mean, Einstein believed these things, you know, that really it's more powerful than knowledge because it takes us beyond knowledge. Imagination is more powerful than knowledge because it takes us beyond the known, someplace else. And we can't invent, we can't innovate, you know, unless we can imagine what could be. And I'm sure that's what you're doing. Who knows what you're going to do in the future, Akshita? Who knows? But it's probably going to be something great. You may be the first person who can control the clouds. How about that?
That is a great idea.
Ken, talking about ideas and plots, is it possible that you may be carrying several plots in your head at one time? How do you decide that the time for this plot has come and I should write a story on this? Because being a person with imagination and so much creativity, I'm sure you're carrying a lot of ideas in your head. So is it like you have a homework to do, so you quickly want to do that story first, or how does it happen? Right, kids? Am I asking the right question?
Well, for me, I put it very simply. So I say, which one is calling to me the loudest on any given day? You know, so if it may be calling to me because there's a deadline. So it's calling to me very loudly, but there may be another reason it's calling to me, and I listen to what's calling to me. So when if I know that this book is going to have 3 stories in it, I won't decide which one I'll write first. It'll be the one that calls to me the loudest, the one that draws me in first, and then I must commit to that story. Once I've committed to that story, it's kind of got me. It's got my full attention. But after that, it's whichever one is calling to me the loudest. Vanya, you had a question, yes. Hello, Vanya.
Look at him and say.
Do we have to use speech bubble in the beginning of the story?
Speech bubble?
No, you were saying that, you know, you need to start the story with someone talking to each other.
Yes,
So she's asking, do we have to begin the story with a speech bubble?
Oh, well, I'm not kind of doing the comic style, you know, the graphic novel style. So it doesn't need to be a speech bubble, Vanya. You know, when you see those little quotation marks in the story to show you that somebody's talking, yeah, that's what I do. So let's say if Vanya is a character in my story, I might put what you said and I might put it in quotation marks, and then I might say, Vanya told me, yeah, or Vanya told Dev. So that's what I mean by putting the speech into the story, the dialogue, the people in the story speaking.
You wanted to tell about the t-shirt.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Vanya
Can
wanted
you?
to say one more thing. We typed in the chat box. Tell him. Tell him. Fast. Tell him
The
fast.
book cover is on a t-shirt.
Tell him.
The book cover is on a t-shirt.
The book in your t-shirt.
Yes. That's this one.
Yeah.
Correct.
Book, yes.
That's that one. Yeah. I do not have a t-shirt for the new book yet, but next time I come to India, I will be wearing it. I'm hoping to come as soon as I possibly can, and I'll come to Chennai just to make sure you're behaving yourself, Vanya.
He's going to come to Chennai. Most welcome.
Sorry, Ken, I just noticed on the chat box I had missed, just like Vanya's thing. Anya had also written that the next adventure could be in the rainforest.
Oh, well, the Amazon in this story, the Amazon is a rainforest, so I probably wouldn't go back to another rainforest just yet. But that's a great suggestion. That I really loved writing about the Amazon, tracing the Amazon River through the rainforest, because there's so many marvelous creatures in rainforests, you know, that I mean, he gets, there's an anaconda, you know, those big snakes, Vanya. Yeah, he gets one of those anacondas and he needs to wrestle with that. And there's also the little pink dolphins that go in the river through there. But I did see that Elena had her hand. Elena, did you want to ask something?
Yes, sir. Do you still daydream?
Do I?
Do you still daydream?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I'm not daydreaming now. I'm completely focused on you and on answering your question. But of course, yes, I do. All human beings daydream. But, you know, sometimes there's no space for daydreaming because they're too busy doing this thing or another thing, you know. And one of the things, you know, that's why I was saying it's a skill to know when to allow yourself to daydream, because sometimes we can't daydream, you know. I mean, you know, if we're chopping the carrots, for example, it might be dangerous to daydream. Yeah. Ganiv, did you want to ask something?
Sir, what is your favorite book other than your books?
You know, I'm often asked this question, and it's a question that I find completely impossible to answer, because I have loved so many books during my life and they all remain like friends to me. And so it's really impossible. There have been many books that I have loved at different times in my life. and they are still best friends to me. So I can't really answer that. You know, one of the beautiful things about books is that they can come to us unexpectedly as friends. You may go to a bookstore and you may have never heard of the author, and you may have never seen that book before, but something draws you to that book and you pick it up, and then you start reading and you want to read that book, and it will become something that you never forget. So it's just like meeting new people as you go through life. You find books and they become your friends. And that's the only way I can really answer your question, Ganev.
Sir, I'm Vanya's mother here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to know, you've written 80 books. So how many picture books out of it and how many chapter books?
I do not know, actually. I think there are more chapter books than picture books. That was certainly the case until the last few years. I didn't do picture books for many years.
Okay.
But in recent years, there's been quite a number of picture books. But I think I still have written more. Yeah, I've definitely written more chapter books. Yeah.
Is there any particular reason why more of chapter books and less of picture books?
I think it's because I can, you see, with a chapter book, the publisher will say yes to me on the basis of that story, you know, because it isn't dependent on having the illustrator, you know, do marvelous artwork. You know, a picture book is a real combination of the immense talents of of people who illustrate, you know, real artists. And so for something to work as a picture book, it really needs to be a really, really compelling idea. And then it needs a lot more that can go with it. Whereas with a chapter book, I'm more or less completely in control of what happens. And the wonderful thing about this new book is that it's got fantastic illustrations, and you know, you could read these stories without illustrations, but the illustrator Suvida Mistry has just done such a wonderful job in showing some of the action and showing the characters, and it's added value to my story, you know. But it's different to a picture book. It's different to a picture book where the images are really quite dominant.
Thank you.
Ira, did you have a question? Ira?
Yeah.
Ira,
I have a question. I wanted to say one idea for the book. They could go under tunnels under the earth.
Tunnels under the earth.
Oh, under the earth. Oh, do you mean like deep into the earth? Is that what you mean? Okay. And Ira, can I ask you, who made these tunnels? Who would make these tunnels?
Rabbits?
Rabbits. Uh-huh. So maybe he would need to shrink himself, would he? To shrink himself down to the size of you on my screen, because you're this big on my screen right now. Maybe if he shrunk himself down that small, he might be scared of the rabbits because they would be a little bit bigger than him. But that would be an adventure for sure. Thank you, Ira. Where do you live, Ira? Which city are you?
I live in Bombay.
I missed that. Where?
Bombay.
Bombay.
Okay, Bombay. Anyway, nice to see you, Ira.
And there is another message on the chat box saying The Great Storyteller is a book we loved, written by you. Smita is saying that. Smita, I think, is the mother.
Uh-huh. Thank you. Thank you, Smita. That's lovely. And that has another wonderful Indian illustrator, Manjari Chakravarti. And it's a book about the importance of stories and about young people learning to tell stories and to carry on stories for the next generation, and about stories being able to help us through really, really tough times. So they learn a lesson in that. For those children that don't know that story, there are some animals and they lose their great storyteller, who's an elephant amongst them. That storyteller grows very, very old and dies, and everybody is so sad because he is gone, but with him, all those stories. And so the children, well, the animals, they must learn to carry on the stories and to keep telling stories. And they learn that because he once told them that once there was a great fire that went through the forest, a great fire that went through the jungle. And they thought that was the end of the world. But then everything came back to life slowly and they were able to regenerate. And he said that they must look forward and to keep telling stories about what was before, because that can give us hope about what is coming next. That's what the Great Storyteller is really about. And it's really about the same thing, the power of the imagination. Naisha, hello Naisha.
I wanted to ask that there are many series that different authors have written, including you, and most of them are connected. So I wanted to ask you, what advice can you, since I'm writing a series, wanted to ask you, what advice can you give me to connect the stories?
In most series, it's the character that connects the stories. In your series, does each part of it have the same characters, main characters?
The first book has one character, has a main character, but the second book, it's about their kids. So does that connect it somehow?
Oh, they're kids. So
Yes.
it's a generations. Yeah, well, that's fine, of course. Some series do carry on through generations like that. So that is a connection. But what will help you with that connection is that those characters in the second story, who were their kids, they must carry with them memories of the people that were in the first book. So you may not tell everything again that you told in the first book, but their memory of it can be explained to a reader who hasn't read the first book. So that gives them depth as characters, that gives them some depth, but also helps you connect those two parts of the series.
Okay, I'm sorry I have to interrupt. It's 1 o'clock and I had promised that it would be from 12 to 1. So it's time to say thank you. Thank you for the lovely audience, Ken. This was an extraordinary audience, which was, so, all ears and such lovely questions. I'm honest about it. And numbers were low, but they were very, very sort of engaging.
They were wonderful. Congratulations
Yes.
to all of you children. It's lovely to see you. And it only makes me, well, it makes me happy and it makes me sad. It makes me sad that I'm not there with you. That's the thing, it makes me sad. But I'm happy to see you at least in this environment. And I can promise you that I will be coming back to India at the very first opportunity that I can. And I hope to see you then. I want to show you, Swati, what I just took from my bookshelf behind me. Can you see? Yes. This is very precious to me, this reader that was given to me by Buckaroo. It's very precious to me, and I keep it on this shelf of books that I have brought back from the subcontinent. And it's a reminder to me that I must come back very soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ken. This is so lovely. Thank you. What a journey it has been. Thank you, children. All I can say is we really miss you. What you probably missed was Ken coming into the crowd and the way he interacts, physically to, come close to you, ask you questions. He never, ever is on the stage. We create all these spaces for the authors to stand and speak. And Ken is always within the audience, asking children, talking to them, bending down, sitting with them. So it's an amazing experience seeing Ken in person, but this was also another one totally. Thank you, Ken, for just keeping us engaged. We didn't even know it was 1 hour. And and thank you, Puffin, for supporting us, and all of you for being there on time and asking such lovely questions and making this afternoon so nice. So goodbye then. See you all. And you can always mail me anything you want. You all have my email ID, right? Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye-bye,
sir.
everybody. Okay, bye-bye.